Vatican Assassins, Chapter 49, The Jesuits, 1906 to 2007, Jesuit Medica, Biowarfare and Genocide. The allopathic American Medical and Dental Associations, continuing Hitler's Nazi SS tortures and medicalized killing, the Food and Drug Administration, 100 years of murder, protecting the Pope's petroleum-based pharmaceutical monopoly, Rome's Holy Office of the Inquisition under another name. The blood of 68 millions of the human race, which has flowed from the veins of the saints and martyrs of Jesus, and which cries to God for vengeance against the Babylonish harlot, leaves us no room to hesitate, respecting the application of Daniel's prediction. The Church of Rome has literally worn out the saints of the Most High, witnessed the heartless cruelties practiced upon the simple and pious Waldenses, see the torrents of blood which have been poured out like streams of water among the martyred Chaldees and Albigenses and Bohemian brethren, the Protestant Bohemian Czechs being the first victims to be sent to Hitler's death camps during the Ore's 20th century 30 Years' War. Look in the horror dens of the Inquisition, before whose ghostly tribunal the young man, the blooming maiden, the aged father, and the fond mother were dragged under the pretext of the suspicion of heresy. But in reality, the glut, the avarice, or lust, or malice of the diabolical inquisitors, exactly as was done in Hitler's Nazi Germany and Stalin's communist USSR, both secretly ruled by the Jesuits. The saints of the Most High were worn out by the tortures of the rack and the fire. Satan ruled supreme in this internal office. Its interior was in strict accordance with the deeds of darkness and of blood, which were daily enacted within its gloomy walls. It seemed as though the seat of Satan had been removed to the earth, and as if he had established a hell in miniature among men. There, by the flash of the glooming torch, you see the servants of the Holy Inquisition, their countenances stern with cruelty, frowning with the scowl of malice upon the victims of ghostly tyranny. In vain does the affrighted prisoner shriek with terror and call for help when he views the instruments of death. The torturing dungeons are so deep, the massy doors are so close, that no groan, however loud, no wail of men in their death agony, no shriek, however piercing, can reach the upper air. There, in hopeless, helpless misery, the unhappy victims of the Antichrist submit to the horrid cruelties with which he wears out the saints of the Most High. One mode of torture I will mention. When the Spanish Inquisition was thrown open by the troops of Napoleon and King Joseph, an image of the Virgin known as the Iron Maiden was found standing in the dark corner of a cell. On closer inspection, it was discovered by the French officer to be an engine of torture. Underneath the robes with which the image was covered was a metal breastplate stuck full of needles, spikes, and lancets. The familiar was ordered to maneuver it. He did so. It raised its arms as if to embrace. A knapsack was thrown into them. Gradually the arms closed, pressing the object within the closer and closer to the breast of the image, crushing and piercing it with 100 wounds. This is one of the implements of death with which papal Rome in the 19th century stood prepared to wear out the saints of the Most High, even as Pope Pius IX called for the return of the guillotine to be used against accursed heretics and liberals. According to Scottish Protestant historian James A. Wiley, oh, who can number the tears and count the sights that have been wrung from the weeping, tortured prisoners of that accursed office? Spain is strewed with the ashes of many of an utter defeat, which at those who loved God's word and gloried in God's truth were roasted alive by the hideous crew of monkish inquisitors and popish priests. England has quivered in every nerve under the torturing grasp of Antichrist, and Ireland has been drenched with Protestant blood. If the blood of 68 millions of the human race is not enough to make this Babylonish woman drunk, she surely must be proof against intoxication. This blood has dyed with its scarlet hue, and fixed the gory mark upon her, which stamps her as the blood-stained harlot, drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. Joseph F. Berg, 1842. The time will arrive very soon in which the company of Jesus will become very solicitous in the human sciences, but without a single application of virtue. The ambition will be to dominate, the overbearing and pride penetrating its soul, to rule alone, and no one can restrain them. Jerome Lanuza, 1650. My work on the Nazi doctors began and ended with a Bavarian-born Roman Catholic, SS Captain and Medical Doctor, Jesuit Temporal Coadjutor Joseph Mengele. Although I had originally considered focusing my study on Mengele, I soon realized that such a focus could further the cult of demonic personality already surrounding him, and thereby neglect the more general Nazi phenomenon of medicalized killing. It was only in 1958 that he began to reach a status of public infamy, and as Mengele moved through various parts of South America, thanks to Pope Pius, Vatican red lines overseen by the Jesuit to prevent capture or extradition, these testimonies of survivors continued unabated. While he is known to have spent considerable time in Argentina and Paraguay, in which had been located the Orders Communist Reduction 1609 to 1767, his long stay in Brazil, founded by the Jesuits, has been less recognized. What we know about the 32-year-old man who arrived in Auschwitz on May 30th, 1943 is not especially remarkable. He was the second son of a well-to-do Bavarian industrialist. The family is described as strict Catholic, and Mengele identified himself as a Catholic on all his official forms. Matriculating at the universities not only in Munich but also in Bonn, Vienna and Frankfurt, Mengele came to concentrate on the physical anthropology and genetics of his time, eventually working under Ottmar von Verscheuer at the Frankfurt University Institute of Hereditary Biology and Racial Hygiene. Mengele was so kind that women at the institute referred to him as Father Mengele, a nickname that could of course have other connotations, including a clandestine priesthood. His medical dissertation, published in 1938 and entitled Genealogical Studies in the Cases of Cleft Lip Jaw Palate, which deformity is usually a result of nutritional deficiencies, not genetic insufficiencies, prefigured his Auschwitz work on genetic abnormalities. His third publication was entitled Hereditary Transmission of Fistula Auris and was published in a journal Der Erbarzt, the Genetic Physician. Dear Truth Seeker, American allopathic physicians today attribute nearly all deformities and chronic diseases to genetic causes, never to vaccines, inherited infections, abusive lifestyles, toxic poisonous environments, or adulterated foodstuffs. Thus, this false genetic theory of disease provides the non-empirical religious dogma necessary for all allopathic treatments, they being prescription drugs, radiation therapies, and radical surgeries, in addition to stem cell research and genetic engineering. Put upon historic white Protestant nations, the Society of Jesus makes a fortune through its pharmaceutical industries while congruently destroying the health of those nations. The allopathic genetic physician is in truth the Nazi physician. What did Mengele actually do in Auschwitz? He had a reputation. It was a name that was heard the most. He was everywhere. He committed real crimes, murderous crimes, direct murder. The Frankfurt court, in indicting him for extradition, knowing full well that he was in Brazil, spoke of hideous crimes, committed alone or with others, willfully and with bloodlust. These crimes included selections, lethal injections, shootings, beatings, and other forms of deliberate killing. He was brutal in a gentlemanly, depraved way. He had no problems, not with his conscience, not with anybody, not with anything. He was absolutely convinced he was doing the right thing, while he continued to whistle his Richard Wagner like an automaton, a gentleman carrying out in different functions, very cold, businesslike, matter of fact, a very bad person, and he saw it in his eyes, brown and bloodshot. His eyes had a cruel expression, or were the eyes of a fish, or dead eyes, wild eyes, or eyes that never looked at one's own eyes. He was free to do whatever he pleased with us. He was the Lord of life and death. how we hated this charlatan, how we despised his detached haughty air, his continual whistling, his absurd orders, his frigid cruelty. Dr. Mengele had the air of a man who took great satisfaction in his work and was pleased with his calling, while many of the guards at Auschwitz wore belt buckles with Catholic crucifixes on them, according to the late Hungarian survivor Theodora Moskowitz. Mengele prepared a special dissection room, including a dissection table of polished marble, a basin with nickel taps, and 3 porcelain sinks. The overall arrangement was the exact replica of any large city's institute of pathology. Mengele in his laboratory became a different person entirely, a demon-possessed fanatic like a dual personality, and if he didn't see blood on his white uniform and shedding the blood of a heretic in accordance with the Jesuit oath, he wasn't content. Dear truth seeker, Joseph Mengele was an SS Jesuit temporal coadjutor under extreme oath, evidenced by his calm mannerisms while committing cold-blooded murder. Disguised as a doctor and imbibed with the false theory of the genetic physician, he was the perfect Manchurian candidate, meticulously performing his professional duties for his master, controlling IG Farben via German Knights of Malta. That evil master was then and is today the Black Pope, invisibly manipulating tens of thousands of American physicians who, like Mengele, are convinced they are doing the right thing. Robert J. Lifton, 1986. Largely unbeknownst to the American people, there is a war going on that has claimed victims in every family. This war is escalating and threatens every human life. It is a war being waged in the interests of the multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical industry ruled by the Pope's Knights of Malta, which is not a health industry, but rather an investment business built on the continuation and expansion of global diseases. Your health and the health of every person in America are threatened in several ways. The business with disease as the basis of the pharmaceutical industry. The pharmaceutical industry is a multi-billion-dollar investment business that has orchestrated the largest fraud in human history. It promises health, but in fact thrives on the continuation of diseases. This fraud scheme is easily unmasked. Most pharmaceutical drugs are designed to merely cover disease symptoms, but are not intended to cure or eradicate diseases. As a direct result of this multi-billion-dollar fraud business, no cure has ever been found for cardiovascular disease, cancer, diabetes, or any other chronic disease. On the contrary, these diseases continue in epidemic proportions, killing about 5,000 Americans every day. This compares to the annihilation of a city of the size of San Francisco every year. The epidemic of dangerous side effects caused by pharmaceutical drugs. The dangerous side effects of Vioxx, Celebrex, and Prozac are not the exception. They are the rule. Due to their synthetic nature, most pharmaceutical drugs are toxic to our bodies, causing organ damage and other serious side effects. According to the American Medical Association, 1 million Americans suffer disabilities from taking pharmaceutical drugs, and more than 100,000 of them die as a result of this every single year. Legislation that protects the expansion of the deadly business with disease. For decades, drug companies have used their giant profits to manipulate the public and influence legislation, including that from the US Congress and the White House. Now that the deadly consequences of the pharmaceutical fraud business have been unmasked, the survival of this industry depends on the protectionist laws. The current push of the George W. Bush administration for so-called medical liability reform is not about protecting gynecologists and the medical doctors from medical liability lawsuits. The centerpiece of the proposed medical liability legislation is to prohibit punitive damage awards and liability lawsuits brought by injured patients against drug companies. This medical liability legislation is being used as a cover to grant amnesty to drug manufacturers, protecting them from having to compensate millions of patients for the harm their drugs have caused. It is payback for the pharmaceutical industry, which was the largest corporate sponsor of the Bush election campaign. As the direct consequence of this law, Tens of millions of Americans will suffer disability and die from preventable diseases within the next decades, further fulfilling the Order's wicked counsel of Trent. Withholding life-saving information about the health benefits of vitamins and natural therapies, a precondition for this business with disease based on patentable synthetic drugs, is the suppression of effective and safe but non-patentable and therefore less profitable natural therapies. For decades, the pharmaceutical industry has strategically expanded its influence on medical education with devastating results. It has deliberately blocked any information about the essential role of vitamins and other micronutrients in maintaining health. That information, which is contained in every textbook of biology, biochemistry, and natural science, from entering medical school teaching and practice. Through their strategic influence, the pharmaceutical industry has established a global monopoly in medicine. As a direct result, generations of medical doctors have not received adequate training in nutritional and other natural therapies. Doctors and patients alike have become victims of the pharmaceuticals industry's efforts to monopolize human health. As a result, tens of millions of Americans have died unnecessarily over the past decades because this life-saving health information has not been available to them. Suppressing effective natural therapies by law, effective, safe, and non-patentable natural therapies threaten the very basis for the pharmaceutical investment business. They target and correct the underlying cellular deficiencies of today's most common diseases, thereby preventing and even eradicating them. The elimination of any disease inevitably destroys the multi-billion-dollar market for the pharmaceutical industry. Thus, the pharmaceutical industry has launched a global campaign to protect its patent-based business with disease by outlawing natural non-patentable therapies at the national and international level. This is the background for the Bush administration's attack on the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act, the key legislation protecting the rights of the American people for free access to natural therapies and a freedom of health choice. If this fundamental human right to natural health is taken away, the health of billions of people will be compromised, and tens of millions of them will pay the ultimate price for generations to come. Kevin Trudeau, 2004. Yes, Judith Vary Baker had the technical qualifications to be the technician that did the bench work in the Ferry Sherman Medical Lab. Hearing Judith admit as a 19-year-old that she assisted Lee Harvey Oswald, David Ferry, Dr. Mary Sherman, and the New Orleans Jesuit Temple coadjutor Dr. Alton Oxner in their efforts to develop a biological weapon is a brainbuster. Judith is adamant that Mary Sherman was definitely part of the cancer virus research project that was going on at David Ferry's apartment. In fact, part of Judith's daily operational cycle was to bring the extracts of a cancer-causing virus research from Ferry's apartment to Mary Sherman's apartment. She also clearly states that Dr. Alton Oxner was ultimately in charge of the Ferry Sherman lab and that both she and Lee Oswald were part of the effort to use the cancer-causing monkey viruses to develop a biological weapon secretly intended to be used against us Americans, thus furthering the Order's counter-reformation. The mice were delivered to his apartment several times per week for processing as part of the operation. To my mind, this has always been what I called the worst-case scenario, the confirmed existence of the secret cooperation between talented scientists, dangerous radioactive equipment, monkey viruses, and political extremists in an underground lab. Judith's knowledge of and personal involvement with the subject of cancer research is remarkable to this day. Upon seeing a 2006 news article about a breakthrough in cancer research involving a mouse whose immune system was extremely good at resisting cancer, Judith sent me an email which said, "We could have cured cancer decades ago, and here you see that macrophages in mice do it. And yes, just as I've claimed they could, this can be turned into an efficient and cheap way to combat cancer. Oh, If only I could have convinced somebody to just give me a chance to direct the lab. And also because they're still just using murine mouse macrophages, a first step that I knew would work way back in 1961. Oh, I feel as if my whole life has been wasted. Have to admit, I just sat down after reading this and wept tears of anger and frustration for the millions who have suffered and died from cancer, especially children. And I knew the key, but my mouth had been stopped up with clay. I cannot stop weeping. This is awful, to feel such anger and helplessness. Yet happy, at last, they should be able to see what to do. Edward T. Haslam, 2006. As everyone knows, rumors surrounding the Kennedy assassination persevered even after the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence and the House Select Committee on Assassinations had issued reports. The HSCA having concluded JFK had been killed by a conspiracy, the old conspiracy theories continued to circulate, and a new generation of theorists arose. Many of these theories depended in part on the idea that the autopsy at Bethesda Naval Hospital was somehow flawed. In response to the heated public dialogue following the release of Oliver Stone's JFK, the CFR-controlled American Medical Association decided to review the autopsy findings and determine whether Navy doctors had indeed participated in a grand cover-up proven by Harrison Edward Livingston in High Treason 2. In May 1992, the Journal of the American Medical Association, JAMA, published the first of two articles exploring allegations that the autopsy findings were untrustworthy. The conclusions dealt a severe blow to conspiracy theories. JAMA stated unequivocally that the physicians who performed the autopsy on the night of November the 22nd had established beyond reasonable doubt that the president was struck by only 2 bullets, which hit him from above and behind his head. In the October 7, 1992 issue of JAMA, editor George D. Lundberg, MD, stated a series of unbiased experts, forensic scientists, pathologists, and radiologists over the years have re-examined the Kennedy autopsy findings using written materials, testimony of Humes, James Joseph Humes, MD, J. Thornton Boswell, MD, and Fink, Pierre Fink, MD. The Zapruder film photographs, x-rays, and microscopic slides. Lundberg concluded that these experts have almost unanimously supported the published findings and interpretations of the autopsy team and the Warren Commission, the single dissenting voice being that of Cyril H. Weck, MD, who is now a regular guest on the Black Pope's pro-Bush Fox News Network. Yet, even he agreed in 1966 and wrote in 73 that all shots were fired from the rear. The calm expert testimony in the most distinguished medical publication in the United States countered the emotional outcries of the amateurs. It was, of course, no surprise to those of us who continue to follow the case. The autopsy findings were confirmed by the Warren Commission in 1964 and 1968, and a partial panel of 4 pathologists and radiologists examined all available evidence and made a 16-page report. 2. Protector of the CIA's SMOM Clay Shaw and David Ferry, Attorney General Ramsey Clark. Cartha Deke DeLoach, 1995. SMOM, ex-assistant director, FBI. He who thinks he knows the Jesuits by having read all the books that were written in the past century, the 18th century, to unmask them, would be grossly deceived. The Jesuitism of that day was an open war against the gospel and society. The Jesuitism of the present is a slow but contagious and deadly disease, which secretly insinuates itself. It is a poison taken under the name of medicine. Luigi de Sanctis, 1852, the health of the people is really the foundation upon which all their happiness and all their power as a state depend. But if the population of the country is stationary or yearly diminishing, if while it diminishes in number, it diminishes also in stature, in strength, that country is doomed. The health of the people is, in my opinion, the first duty of a statesman. Benjamin Disraeli, 1877. Jesuits awed Casey, they're brilliant. I'm absolutely convinced that they have the right dope on this world. I want to be a Colonel House the guy behind the throne advising the President of the United States. As his wife was later to observe, Bill got his self-assurance from the Jesuits. The Jesuits had done their work well. He was armored in his religion. Joseph E. Persico, 1990. Baby Doc, in his tireless devotion to saving the demonically possessed, cannot bear the burden of watching his people die, the wretched death unleashed upon those doomed for hell. We are left with no alternative but to heed the word of God, the Pope, and spare him from annihilation. For this reason we will send in the missionaries, Jesuit mercenaries, to inoculate the population with a vaccine that will spare only the good of heart by virtue of its design. Baby Doc has complied with the Vatican's orders to the best of his ability in his demon-infested land and must resign his post. William J. Casey, 1985. We, the people of the United States and peace-loving citizens around the world, now face the nightmarish danger. Deadly animal viruses are now multiplying in our bodies. Leonard Horowitz, 1997. Current medical science is nothing but a false dogma imposed almost universally by no matter what means, legitimate or not, by medical power in close alliance with the chemical syndicate. Their purpose, as will be demonstrated in the following chapters, is not the people's health, which is just being used as a pretext for extorting large sums of money, but the aggrandizement of their own wealth and might. In every country, the ruling medical power is one of the syndicate's most reliable collaborators, the more efficient for being unrecognized by the ignorant, misled majority. The medical power has today the role that belonged to the Inquisitional Roman Catholic Church in the Middle Dark Ages. Hans Rusch, 1982. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? They that see shall narrowly look upon thee and consider thee, saying, Is this the man who made the earth to tremble? Who did shake kingdoms? Who made the world like a wilderness and destroyed its cities? Who opened not the house of its prisoners? Isaiah 14 verses 12, 16, and 17. No better description of the company has ever been so simply put than that of Mr. Luigi De Sanctis, who later became a Reformed pastor, when his description is applied to the American Medical Association, AMA, the American Dental Association, ADA, and the Food and Drug Administration, FDA. We can easily see that these three agencies, as arms of the great Jesuit conspiracy described by Battalion in the Jesuit Conspiracy, the secret plan of the order, printed in 1848, the purpose of the AMA, ADA, and FDA is to destroy the heretic and liberal American people in the name of helping them. By making the people chronically ill, these agencies break any will to resist an American fascist tyranny, possibly to be overseen by Fox News Network's Jesuit-trained Knight of Malta, Patrick J. Buchanan, and the coming New World Order under the Jesuits' infallible Pope. The AMA, as we know it today, began in the early 1900s. The Jesuits, through 33rd degree and Shrine of Freemasonry, the Morgans and the Rockefellers in particular, began to control the medical education of young physicians, teaching them to treat symptoms with their petroleum-based drugs. Later came surgery and then radiation, completing the medical unholy trinity of cut, burn, and poison. Warning us of the drug-happy allopathic doctor we read in 1912. For the doctor who imagines he can kill disease by his drug-gatling gun will, quite as oft, kill his patient, as has been the case with tens of thousands of WW2 veterans. Be suspicious of the doctor who comes into the sick room with an air of omnipotence, takes out his stethoscope as though it was Gabriel's trumpet, writes a lot of Latin prescriptions, i.e. the language of Rome, and asks never a question regarding the daily habits of the patient. Beware, I say, of this class of physicians. They will sit with one hand on your pulse and the other on your pocketbook, and not leave until one or the other gives out. But cure you, never. It isn't in them. They haven't the first conception of what a real, progressive, up-to-date physician really is able to do for his patients. Dear Truth Seeker, is not this the heart and soul of American medicine? The monstrous drug companies, controlled by the Knights of Malta, were some of the financiers behind the Jesuits' Council on Foreign Relations, which in turn created and now control the medical inquisitors, the AMA, ADA, and FDA, purposing to sicken white, Celtic, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant American people. The AMA and FDA promoted mass vaccinations and immunizations. Senator Edward Ted Kennedy, the darling of Georgetown University, in Boston College, Jesuits, knowing who really murdered his brothers, introduced a new legislation that would attempt to vaccinate all children in the American empire, while severely limiting exemptions parents could claim. He also seeks to set up a nationwide vaccine registry to track parents who resist the injections of monkeypox, mercury, and formaldehyde into their children's bloodstreams. These slow poisons, in the name of medicine, contain live viruses which later erupt into incurable diseases such as cancer. Dr. William Campbell Douglas tells us in his second opinion. I reported nearly 10 years ago on the alarming finding that a monkey virus, simian virus 40, had contaminated both the Salk and Sabin polio vaccines. The Jesuits always using Rome's court juice in the forefront. It was known at the time that the virus caused brain cancer in experimental animals, but it was covered. There was no worry as it caused no problems in humans. What the public was not told is that since SV40 is a retrovirus like AIDS, it would take 20 to 40 years before we would know what damage had been done. I noted at the time that brain tumors had increased in frequency since I was graduated from medical school. In 1950 they were rare, but by 1990 they were common. 1950 plus 40 equals 1990, the year I made my first report on SV40 in brain tumors. The horrifying truth came out in the February 14, 1999 London Telegraph. The mass vaccination campaigns of the 50s and 60s may be causing hundreds of deaths a year because of a cancer-causing virus which contaminated the first polio vaccine. According to scientists known as SV40, the virus came from dead monkeys whose kidney cells were used to culture the first Salk vaccines. Doctors estimate that the virus was injected into tens of millions during mass vaccination campaigns before being detected and screened out in 1963. Those born between 1941 and 1961 are thought to be most at risk of having been infected. Now, a new study of the effects of SV40 points to disturbing evidence that the monkey virus causes a number of human cancers such as non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and prostate cancer and bone cancer. The monkey virus may be passing from those given the contaminated vaccine to their children, spreading the cancer risk still further. Additionally, we read polio vaccine developed in the late 1940s from dead pig and monkey kidney pus infected with poliomyelitis, electalbumin hydrolysate, chemical antibiotics, and calf serum. This live virus vaccine recently tested to harbor 149 live viruses and bacteria living in the vaccine, including SV40 virus, also found in cancer cells. It can cause intestinal flu, autoimmune diseases, juvenile childhood diabetes, children's rheumatoid arthritis, and childhood lupus. The Center for Disease Control, the CDC, reported that during 1973 and 1983, 87 of polio cases were caused by the polio vaccine injection, and from 1980 to 1989, the polio vaccine shots caused 100% of all domestic polio incidences. Dr. Jonas Salk is quoted as admitting, when you inoculate children with a polio vaccine, you don't sleep well for 2 or 3 weeks. E. McBean, The Poison Needle Health Research, page 144. Dr. Salk killed virus vaccine proliferation resulted in polio incidents doubling nationwide, some states reporting 400 and 600 increases. The Jesuits using their Masonic juice within the Black Pope's International Medical Inquisition, providing another reason to mass murder American Jews. The deliberate poisoning of the bloodstreams of white Protestant nations should not be a surprise in the light of the Council of Trent. The Jesuits declared they would do this in the protocols of the learned elders of Zion. We read from protocol number 10, it is indispensable to trouble in all countries the people's relations with their governments, so as to utterly exhaust humanity with dissension, hatred, class, struggle, envy, and even to the use of torture by starvation, by the inoculation of diseases. Dear Truth Seeker, have not our many inoculations received in both civilian and military life resulted in the tortures of the orders? Many medical treatments, as well as the deaths of countrymen, have suffered due to being eaten alive by cancer. Later, the agents of the Jesuits would institute the draft, creating a huge army. This army of the American Empire, financed by the Black Pope's fractional reserve, Federal Reserve Bank, and built for the restoration of the temporal power of the Pope, would have to fight globally. Therefore, its soldiers would be mass vaccinated with harmful viruses and bacteria in the semen. Their wives and babies would become infected, producing more cancers in the women and birth defects in the children. Composed of 14th Amendment citizen/subjects raised on worthless Federal Reserve notes, the army of the American Empire, including the very lives and health of its fighting men, is the legal property of Rome. The Gulf War syndrome, ably defined and righteously attacked by Gulf War veteran George Riley, is a classic example of murder by military/medical injection. The Vatican, with its sovereign military order of Malta, has created and mutated many viruses that have been used for the systematic annihilation of the heretic and liberal American people. The Knights, with their former Nazi, CIA, and drug companies, created a human immune deficiency virus, HIV, causing the present acquired immune deficiency syndrome, AIDS epidemic. That virus is in every hepatitis B vaccine administered by the medical inquisitors, the AMA. We read from Emerging Viruses, AIDS and Ebola by the brilliant Len Horowitz. Though polio vaccines are also suspected of transmitting HIV-1 and other viruses, the unique epidemiology and concurrent outbreaks of AIDS in New York City and Central Africa appears to coincide more closely with the administration of experimental hepatitis B vaccines than with either the Salk or Sabin vaccines. Since the 1930s, during the tyranny of Masonic FDR, the Jesuit conspiracy against the health of Protestant America has greatly advanced. The true cures for viral diseases were heavily suppressed. Those cures were primarily oxygen ozone light with color, ultraviolet blood irradiation, so ably explained by Dr. William Campbell Douglas in his Into the Light, and Kenneth J. Dillon's Healing Photons, the Science and Art of Blood Irradiation Therapy, and direct current frequency generators using both photons and electrons. The use of medical grade ozone, Royal Life photon/frequency machine, Emmett Knott's blood irradiator, and Darius Dinshaw's light color therapy spectrochrome were all violently suppressed. The use of medical grade colloidal silver was discontinued and all non-drug remedies were forced underground. And why? Because these treatments address the true causes of chronic disease. Of these causes, Dr. William H. Philpott tells us the oxidoreductase enzymes are necessary to produce biological life energy by oxidation, phosphorylation, producing ATP, and oxidation remnant negative pole magnetism. The biological life energy consists of enzyme catalytic production of adenosine triphosphate ATP, oxidative remnant magnetism, A negative magnetic field. This oxidation/reduction enzymatic response is dependent upon alkalinity and molecular oxygen, alkaline hyperoxia. This oxidoreductase family of enzymes is alkaline hyperoxic negative, south-seeking magnetic field activation dependent. When these three physiologically normal factors are not present, then cellular ATP is made by fermentation. The three factors necessary for fermentation to produce ATP are acidity, a lack of oxygen, a positive north-seeking static magnetic field as an enzyme energy activator. Human cells have the capacity to make ATP be either phosphorylation or fermentation. ATP made by fermentation with its acid hypoxic medium cannot maintain human biological life energy. ATP made by fermentation can maintain the life energy of microorganisms such as bacteria, fungi, viruses, parasites, and cancer cells. The secret to reverse acute maladaptive symptom reactions, prevent and reverse microorganism infections, maintaining human biological health, and providing for the reversal of degenerative diseases is to maintain a normal alkaline body pH, hyperoxia, and adequate negative south-seeking static magnetic field. In these great words of wisdom lay the cures for all cancers, heart disease, diabetes, and chronic infections. Therefore, by refusing all infective vaccinations and immunizations, as well as amalgam fillings and root canals, by using negatively charged photons and ions to kill all anaerobic bacteria, viruses, fungus, and microscopic parasites such as ultraviolet light and ozone/oxidative therapies, coupled with internal use of grapefruit seed extract by keeping the body in a highly alkaline state using enzymes and alkaline minerals as found in raw, unprocessed foods, whole food supplementation, and alkaline water by keeping a highly oxygenated state through deep breathing, exercise, and oxygen therapies such as hyperbaric oxygen and ozone steam cabinets by keeping in negatively charged magnetic fields such as magnetic beds, magnetic wraps, magnetic bricks, and seat pads while drinking magnetized alkaline water, all North Pole, and by using lateral and wildcrafted herbs. Historic white Protestant/Baptist Calvinist nations would cease to be the leaders in chronic degenerative diseases, and the Jesuit order's wicked counter-reformation would begin to be successfully resisted by those peoples once again. But the licensed treatment of the AMA's created diseases must be by means of Rome's unholy trinity: cut, burn, and poison. The Church of Modern Medicine tolerates no heresy and uses the sword of our CFR-controlled government to punish those obstinate medical heretics who would dare to truly cure us Americans of our diseases deliberately put upon us by the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. Indeed, Satan, using his Jesuit-ruled globalist Vatican Empire, has weakened the nations in every way, especially in our health. And of course, the Knights of Malta control the great pharmaceutical industries such as Merck, Sharp, and Dohme, as they are connected with the Order's Central Intelligence Agency. The late Knight of Malta, Elmer H. Bobst, past chairman of Warner Lambert Company, and Knight of Malta Louis E. Lerman, a Romanist and racial Jew, whose family owns the Rite Aid chain of American drugstores, have been and are papal soldiers. Oh yes, the Holy Scriptures are true when describing Rome one day to move a world commercial power to the rebuilt city of Babylon on the Euphrates River as that great city Babylon, that mighty city. For thy merchants were the great men of the earth, for by thy sorceries were all nations deceived. Thus the risen Son of God will one day cry out to his Abrahamic covenant-bound, greatly beloved Semitic, Hebrew, Jewish, Israelitic, racial brethren, come out of her, my people, that she be not partakers of her sins, and that she receive not of her plagues. For her sins have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities. Revelation chapter 18 verses 10, 23, 4, and 5. In place of proven cures, the AMA, ADA, and FDA have pushed toxic, mercury-laced fillings and drugs down the throats of trusting Americans. This has resulted in the unnecessary suffering and death of millions, while at this writing there are over 100 million chronically ill people in the American Empire. Two brilliant Jews responsible for the exposure of the American medical and dental inquisitions are Dr. Robert S. Mendelsohn and Dr. Leonard Horowitz. Dr. Mendelsohn, in his classic Confessions of a Medical Heretic, likens the medical establishment to the Roman Catholic institution, calling it Church of Modern Medicine. The doctor is the priest, the birth certificate is the baptismal certificate, toxic silver nitrate applied to the eyes at birth is baptism, the nurses are inquisitors, etc. He boldly declares, I do not believe in modern medicine. I am a medical heretic. I believe that modern medicine's treatments for disease are more dangerous than the diseases they are designed to treat. I believe that more than 90% of modern medicine could disappear from the face of the earth. Doctors, hospitals, drugs and equipment, and the effect on our health would be immediate and beneficial, for the hospital is the temple of the church of modern medicine, and thus one of the most dangerous places on the earth. There's plenty to be afraid of. The God that resides in the temple of modern medicine is death. The doctor priest gets away with a lot because he can claim to be up against the very forces of evil. Never is he seen in his true light as the agent of the devil. We have a medical inquisition. The first sign of an inquisition is the selling of indulgences. Medical insurance is the doctor's version of indulgences. Like the communion wafer, which Catholics receive on the tongue, drugs are the communion wafers of modern medicine. Try getting from one end of life to the other without paying your dues to modern medicine. Immunizations, fluoridated water, intravenous fluids, and silver nitrate. When you get to the cathedrals and the little Vaticans of modern medicine, you are up against priests who have the weight of infallibility behind them. They can do no wrong, so they are most dangerous. Dr. Mendelsohn knew what he was describing. He had been a devoted medical priest and had watched the inquisitors for years. He was well acquainted with the Jesuits at Loyola University in Chicago while a professor in the School of Medicine at the University of Illinois. Over the years, he observed the horrendous parallels between the Church of Modern Medicine and the Roman Church. He later became a most eloquent and undefeated champion in exposing the crimes of modern medicine. His opponents in debate would not even make an appearance. The life and message of Robert Mendelsohn was hated by the Jesuits' medical inquisition, controlled by the AMA, ADA, and FDA through the Archbishop of New York's Council of Foreign Relations. Clearly, this perfidious Jew was believable. Therefore, one day in good health, at the age of 63, payback time had arrived for this obstinate heretic. He suddenly died, a victim of the poison cup, at the hand of another Vatican assassin, invisible until his stroke was felt. Dr. Leonard Horowitz, before his SMOM knighthood, was of the same caliber as Dr. Mendelsohn. In his fantastic book Emerging Viruses, AIDS and Ebola, he connects the Vatican's Knights of Malta to the Nazis, the pharmaceutical drug companies, and the AIDS/cancer virus makers within the CIA. We read, the Gehlen Org, the German intelligence agency run by Reinhard Gehlen, was even more powerful than the Merknet. The Org superseded even the Nazi SS because of its pre-war connections with the Abwehr, or German military intelligence. In fact, Gehlen's organization is largely credited for giving rise to the CIA, to shield Gehlen and the entire German intelligence network from harm's way. Gehlen was a ranking official in the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, SMOM, which maintained inconceivable financial and political influence. Somehow I wasn't surprised to learn that financial motives were at the heart of SMOM and the Nazi-American alliance. Soon after the war, OSS found the extensive documentation of a meeting in Strasbourg on August 10, 1944, between representatives of the SS party and firms like Krupp, owned by NATO Malta Alfred Krupp, one of the founders of the Pope's European Union, IG Farben and its president NATO Malta Hermann Schmitz being a close personal friend of the Führer's ambassador to the Vatican, NATO Malta Franz von Papen. The world's masses knew nothing about the partnership formed between John D. Rockefeller's Standard Oil Company, Germany's IG Farben, and Hitler's Third Reich. The pirates of Wall Street, Alan and John Foster Dulles of the CFR's law firm Sullivan and Cromwell, had secretly negotiated this alliance. It was not known to Allied airmen flying bombing missions over Germany why the IG Farben plants where Hitler's munitions were made were exempted from attack. Likewise, when the IG Farben Rockefeller consortium used concentration camp victims as slaves to build and run their factories, it never made the news controlled by NATO Malta Henry R. Lucy. Nor was it heralded that this same team patented and sold the gas that the Nazis used in the concentration camps to send millions to their graves. Recent headlines have asked to know where the Nazi gold went. Historians only recently recorded that the Rockefeller Chase Bank, manned by a Knight of Malta Joseph J. Larkin, was among the largest recipients. Dear Truth Seeker, according to the 1993 Annual Report of Council on Foreign Relations, the Rockefeller Group, Sullivan and Cromwell, and the Chase Manhattan Bank are all listed on the corporate member roster of the Jesuits Council on Foreign Relations. Along with these are the drug giants Dow Chemical, Bristol Myers Squibb, Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, and Procter & Gamble. Another member is the Center for Disease Control North America. And guess who is one of the guiding lights overseeing the heads of these giant monopolies of murder? It is CFR member / presider and president of the Jesuit Orders Fordham University, a professed Jesuit of the Fourth Vow, Joseph A. O'Hare. Amidst this fraternity, we find a Roman Catholic tool of the Jesuits who developed the HIV virus and thus the AIDS epidemic, the world's leading retrovirologist, Robert C. Gallo. This fiend, awarded his Sword of Ignatius Loyola in 88 by the Order's St. Louis University, was pardoned by CFR-controlled Jesuit temporal coadjutor President Bill Clinton for scientific misconduct. Horowitz correctly concludes, thus, both of this century's worst genocides, the Jewish-Eurasian Holocaust and the AIDS epidemic, appear to have been determined by the same masterminds whose covert operations and deadly deceptions have beaten humanity by default. Those masterminds, Dr. Horowitz, are the Jesuits, the monsters who, with their Knights of Malta, financed World War II, murdered millions of your Semitic Hebrew/Jewish race, assassinated our President Kennedy, and developed killer viruses. The Order, in control of the press, covered all this up and prevented the use of proven treatments that easily cure their created viral diseases. We became their victims as we were forced to go to Mexico for medical help or herded into that church of modern medicine to be tortured and mutilated by their medical inquisitors, like the docile slaves depicted by the Jesuits, Freemason, and Fabian socialist H.G. Wells. In his The Time Machine, we have marched into the caves of Rome's medical inquisition and have been devoured by the cannibals who cut, burn, and poison us. The result has been the final solution to the heretic and liberal question in North America, sentencing millions of Baptists, Protestants, Jews, and liberals, Roman Catholics, to horrible, ghastly deaths initiated by the hellish, damnable, dreadful, and deplorable slow poisons deceptively called vaccinations and immunizations made from the precious little bodies of aborted millions. The mass genocide of the heretic and liberal American people, carried out by the Order's American Medical Association in conjunction with its Food and Drug Administration and the CDC, has created a nation of the walking wounded. In the words of Abadia Leon, this secret war, relentlessly waged against our heretic and liberal nation for the last 100 years, having slowly but surely fattened, sickened, weakened, polluted, agitated, divided, and disarmed us, has further enabled our unified, healthy, and physically fit Russian, Muslim, Chinese, and Mexican invaders to extirpate and exterminate us from the face of the whole earth. The Council of Trent and the Jesuit oath of the Fourth Vow continue to be fulfilled as we remember a portion of the bloody fourth vow of the professed Jesuit. I do further promise and declare that I will, when opportunity presents, make and wage relentless war, secretly and openly, against all heretics, Protestants, and liberals. I will secretly use the poison cup, as I at any time may be directed so to do by any agent of the Pope or superior of the Brotherhood of the Holy Faith of the Society of Jesus. Jesuit Provincial Thomas H. Smolik, 2002, California Province of the Society of Jesus. Jesuit Thomas H. Smolik, one of the 10 provincials overseeing the Black Pope's Holy Roman 14th Amendment American Empire, is the Order's most powerful legal-eyed West Coast Jesuit. As all provincials are professed of the Fourth Vow, Smolik was the immediate master of former California Governor Gary Davis, Senator Columbus of the Fourth Degree, remembering that the official position of the Jesuit Conference is the total abolition of gun ownership. Californians have now been legally disarmed of their assault rifles, further rendering them unable to repel our coming Sino-Soviet Muslim Catholic Latino invasion. Having practiced in the Straits of Formosa, our Asian invaders will be transported by a combined Chinese and Russian merchant marine of over 2,000 ships, with Los Angeles to be the beachhead. This attack will be successful, unlike the Order's attempted invasion of repentant pro-Bible Protestant England in 1588 using the Papal Caesar's Spanish Armada. The Protestant Reformation will be finished and we Americans will be raped, plundered, and mass murdered by foreign marauding pagan savages fulfilling the Order's bloody oath. Judith Very Baker, 2000. Cancer researcher Judith Very Baker, 1962. Of all those involved in the bioweapons research lab in New Orleans, Judith is the sole survivor who has lived to tell the story. CIA assets Lee Harvey Oswald and David Ferrie were murdered. Dr. Mary Sherman's brutal death in 1964 has been ruled an unsolved murder by New Orleans police, and CIA/Nazi fascist Jesuit temporal co-juder Dr. Alton Oxner died of natural causes in 1981. Jesuit temporal co-juder Dr. Robert C. Gallo, 1990s. Dr. Alton Oxner was a Papal Knight, CIA asset, and obedient co-conspirator in the JFK assassination, and thus was a recipient of one of the Order's highest awards, Integritas Vitae, given by Loyola University in New Orleans in 1978. Even so, Italian Roman Catholic Jesuit temporal co-juder Dr. Robert Gallo is a Papal Knight, CIA asset, and obedient co-conspirator in the murder of millions of AIDS victims, and thus a recipient of the Order's Sword of Ignatius Loyola, awarded by St. Louis University in 1988. Behind Gallo above is the infamous National Institutes of Health, NIH, in Bethesda, Maryland, where his power was supreme, alleging that AIDS was caused by the HIV retrovirus. Apart from a depressed immune system, Gallo in fact was the creator of the AIDS virus in 1974 and hailed as its discoverer in 1984, after President Bill Clinton pardoned the Order's foremost molecular biologist for scientific misconduct. In 1998, this medical Grand Inquisitor continued his work for the greater glory of God. New York City, the Papal Caesar's political capital of the world, ruled by the American Empire's Archbishop of New York, he controlling New York's Council on Foreign Relations, it erecting dictators around the world loyal to the Pope of Rome, he maintaining or removing world leaders with his CIA or his KGB/SVR. Mary Robinson, President of Ireland, professed Jesuit Joseph A. O'Hare, CFR presider and President of Fordham University, 1994. Treasonous Jesuit-controlled CFR advisors, 1999. Masonic Cyrus R. Vance, former Secretary of State. P2 Masonic/Knight of Malta Henry Kissinger, former Secretary of State. P2 Masonic/Knight of Malta David Rockefeller, CFR presider and the Black Pope's American international banker who replaced J.P. Morgan.